Hi scholars. In this video, I want to talk to you about the Powell's levels of listening and conversation. This was developed by a lady named Susan Powell, and again, I'm never going to test you on names or dates. But what Dr. Powell was trying to do was she wanted to identify how listening and topics of conversation can contribute to the growth, maintenance, or even decline in a relationship. Through her research, she identified 4 specific levels of listening or conversation that help determine whether a relationship is going to be growing from this, maintaining, or declining. And that's what I want to talk to you about in this video. So these are the 4 levels. In the first level, niche or ritual conversation, here the 2 basically are just acknowledging the existence of each other. This is like, hey, how you doing? Fine, how are you? Good. Have a good day. Thank you. In other words, it's just the standard conversation that we give to even complete strangers. The purpose of niche or ritual conversation is really to simply acknowledge the other person. There isn't a lot of in-depth conversation and not really much listening to each other. The questions or comments are almost scripted and the responses are predetermined. If somebody says, hey, how you doing? It's almost expected that we're going to say fine. The niche or ritual level really kind of leads to a relationship decline if too much time is spent here. Now, because of busy schedules and time restrictions, a typical relationship will spend maybe even half of their time at this level, and that's okay. But a relationship that spends almost all of their time kind of in this ritual niche conversation is going to decline over time. And a common metaphor that is used to describe this is think of a relationship as being like a plant, and the plant doesn't have enough sunlight or water. It doesn't die immediately, but it begins to wither away. And that's what happens at this level, again, if it's too often. The second level is factual. The factual level. In this one, we're really focused on the who, what, when, in other words, just the facts. So an example of this is if we use an example of like Robert and Sandy, and they're a married couple. And Sandy comes home from work, and Robert says, how was your day? And Sandy goes, oh, there was a big fight at work. And Robert says, what happened? And she talks about the things that happened. Well, Carl was doing work and noticed that Mike had overstepped and ended up doing some of his job and didn't do it right, and Carl was upset. So he went to the manager, and then the manager blew up. Notice that she's really just focused on the facts of what happened. Factual conversation allows for a relationship to be maintained. It can be maintained because Sandy is actually sharing the events of her life, but it doesn't allow for actual growth in a relationship. The reason for that is because Sandy is not actually a unique source. Robert could call anybody else who was at the office that day and get the same information. What happened? Who was involved? When did it occur? Things like that. In order to get actual growth, we need to move on to the third level of conversation and listening, and that is opinion or judgment. This is when we talk about what we think about what happened. So, in other words, our opinion. So if Robert, going back to the example of Robert and Sandy, if Robert asked Sandy, so what do you think about what happened? And Sandy says, well, you know, Carl probably, or Mike shouldn't have done Carl's job for him because Mike really doesn't know what he's doing with that job. But when it happened, Carl gets oversensitive and he shouldn't have gone to talk to the boss. But honestly, the person I think is most to blame is the manager. When Carl went to him and talked to him about what was bugging him, the manager could have easily just called Mike and Carl into the office and talked it over with them privately. Instead, the manager came out and was upset and vocalized his objection or his frustration to the entire work office. And that made everybody feel upset. You get the idea. Here she's talking about what she thinks about what happened. This is the first level that allows for growth because you'll notice in this one, Sandy actually is a unique source. Sandy's the only one that can actually tell you her opinion. I mean, I guess Robert could call somebody who Sandy's already told her opinion to and get it, but this is really kind of unique to Sandy. Okay, it's not about the events, it's about what she thinks of the events. The fourth level, the deepest level, is feeling or emotion. This is how do you feel about what happened. Now, this is the hardest level for us to communicate, and it's the hardest level for us to listen to. The reason why it's so hard to communicate is because this is the level that makes us the most vulnerable. Our feelings are one of the deepest parts of our core. And so when we express it, it really is expressing our deepest thoughts. In addition to that, being able to put our feelings into words can be very, very challenging. In fact, a lot of people struggle with this more than any other topic. Some people, when they were young, they weren't encouraged to express their feelings. If they cried before they could really think of the words to say, they were discouraged from doing that. If they were expressing their anger or their happiness, their excitement or whatever, they were discouraged from doing it. But in addition to being very difficult to communicate because of how vulnerable we are, it's also very difficult to listen to. Listening to somebody express their feelings, I mean, assuming in the Robert and Sandy case that Robert cares about Sandy, and so when Sandy's talking about her being upset or angry or sad or whatever, Robert's likely instinct is to want to make her feel better by fixing the problem. And this is where it becomes difficult. Oftentimes when people are expressing their feelings, what they really want from us is for us to listen and try to understand. But our instinct is to try to make the person feel better. And one way that we do that is to try to make it seem, or we try to convince them they don't need to feel that way. They shouldn't feel that way. So if Sandy's talking about how upset she is, Robert might be like, well, why do you feel that way? She tries to get her to rationalize it. Well, here's the thing. Feelings are not rational. If feelings were rational, they would be thoughts. Feelings by their very nature go deeper than our thinking, our rational thought. So sometimes we can't rationalize our feelings. In addition to that, it's because she's talking about the problem with her boss and how upsetting it is. Robert might want to try to make her feel better by trying to make her realize that it's not so bad. So she talks about something her boss did, and he's like, oh, don't worry about it. Bosses are like that. You want to hear what my boss did? His intent is good. His intent is positive. He's trying to make her feel like this isn't something to be upset about. But in actuality, what he's doing is invalidating her feelings, making it to where she really doesn't have a right to feel this way. Now, if a relationship spends a lot of time in feeling and emotion, it's going to be a lot of strain on the two of them. At the same time, when a conversation can be at this level and the sender can communicate their feelings and the receiver can genuinely listen to them, this is the level of conversation and listening that allows for maximum growth in a relationship. Thank you very much for your attention and for watching the video, and I will see you at the next video.